We hear about the global population all the time, right? And it's always presented as this one giant, overwhelming number. But what if that's not the real story? Today, we're going to dig into why where we all live is actually way more important than how many of us there are. Let's get into it. So, the number is just staggering. Over 8 billion people on this planet. I mean, that's a figure so huge, it's almost impossible to wrap your head around. But here's the thing. If we only focus on that total, we miss the real story, which is hidden in the details of our global neighborhood.
Exactly. Because where we choose to live, or sometimes where we're forced to move, creates this incredible ripple effect. I mean, it literally redraws political maps, completely reshapes economies, transforms our societies, and yeah, it puts unbelievable pressure on our planet. So let's unpack why that is.
Okay, first up, let's talk about power. Your physical address, it's so much more than just a place to get your mail. It's a fundamental piece of your country's political puzzle. It actually determines who speaks for you in government, and frankly, how loud that voice gets to be.
And the main tool for figuring all this out is the census. Now, lots of countries do one, but in the United States, for example, it's actually written into the Constitution that they have to count every single person every 10 years. And believe me, it's a massive undertaking that goes way beyond just simple record keeping.
So here's the crucial point. This count, the census, is used to hand out political representation. In the U.S. system, for instance, the number of seats a state gets in the House of Representatives is tied directly to its population. It's pretty simple. More people literally means more power.
And you can see this happen in real time, when populations shift, like when people move out of a state like Washington and into a state like Montana, political power moves right along with them. Washington loses a representative in Congress, and Montana gains one. A simple change of address, when it's multiplied by thousands, can completely realign a nation's political landscape. It's wild.
And the effects, well, they don't stop there. Population density forces governments to constantly draw and redraw these super complex voting districts. And in some cases, intense overcrowding can stir up all new kinds of political tensions that leaders have to figure out how to deal with. It's this constant, ever-changing process.
All right, let's move on to our second ripple, and you'll see how this all connects. Just like power follows people, you guessed it, so does the money. Where we live is one of the single biggest drivers of all economic activity and investment.
It's a really simple but powerful idea. Businesses go where the people are, right? A dense population means you've got a huge base of customers and a deep pool of workers. That concentration acts like a magnet for companies to open up shops, build factories, and invest their capital.
Now, what's really fascinating is to look at the reverse of that. The American Rust Belt is a perfect example. When a ton of manufacturing jobs moved, people had to leave to find work somewhere else. This created a kind of negative feedback loop, leading to economic decline and making it that much harder to attract any new investment back into the area.
And it's not just private companies either. Governments do the exact same thing. Public funding for all that crucial infrastructure, we're talking roads, schools, hospitals, is overwhelmingly directed towards high-density areas. Why? Well, simply because that's where the money can serve the most people.
This brings us to the third ripple, the social one. Because when massive numbers of people start clustering together in cities, it doesn't just change the economy, it fundamentally changes how we live, how we interact with each other, and how we organize our entire lives.
Just think about it for a second. Urbanization, or high-density living, often leads to much better access to services. The quality of education can go up, and there's usually better access to specialized medical care. But it also changes our social fabric, It often shifts the focus away from those big extended family networks to smaller nuclear family units.
And all of this leads us to the final, and maybe the most critical ripple of all, the environmental one. How does the way we group together on this planet affect the planet itself? This is where we run into a really important concept called carrying capacity. So when you have these concentrated populations, they put an immense amount of pressure on natural resources. The demand for food, energy, and clean water just skyrockets. It can lead to things like deforestation and habitat loss. And as we see in huge megacities like Delhi or Mexico City, it creates these massive pollution hotspots.
And this gets us to that core idea of carrying capacity. Basically, it's the theory that any environment, including the whole planet, has a natural limit how many people it can support sustainably. If you go past that limit, you risk doing long-term, maybe even irreversible damage.
But here's the catch. Geographers are intensely divided on what Earth's carrying capacity actually is. I mean, some argue we've already blown right past it. But then you have others who make the case that with the right technology and distribution, our planet could support a population many, many times larger than what we have today. The views are just polar opposites.
And the reason for this huge debate is that the answer isn't some simple number. It's a moving target that depends almost entirely on one single word: consumption. Wealthier populations consume resources at a vastly higher rate than less wealthy ones. So carrying capacity isn't just about how many people there are, it's about how those people live.
So let's bring all these ripples together for a second. What have we seen? We've seen that where you are in the map has a direct, measurable impact on pretty much every single aspect of life.
So let's just recap real quick. Politically, where we live shifts power and redraws the lines of who represents us. Economically, it directs the flow of money and decides where infrastructure gets built. Socially, it completely redefines our communities and even our family structures. And finally, environmentally, it tests the absolute limits of our planet's resources. And remember, that ultimate environmental limit, that carrying capacity, it isn't some fixed number set in stone. It's a dynamic equation, and it's constantly being influenced by how much we consume, by our changing climate, and by our ability to grow food.
Which kind of leaves us with this one big thought. Maybe, just maybe, we've been asking the wrong question this whole time. Maybe the real puzzle isn't about figuring out the maximum number of people our planet can hold, but instead it's about deciding how much is truly enough for each of us to thrive. What do you think?